Welcome to EPG Pathshala. This is the module on agrarian ecology. I'm going to talk on Jhum cultivation in India. Jhum cultivation is a primitive form of farming and is still prevalent in some parts of Central Africa, Central America, Southeast Asia, and China. This type of cultivation also assumes various names such as slash and burn, rotational bush fallow, swidden, or shifting cultivation. In Assam, it is known as Jhum, Podu and Dunga. In Andhra Pradesh, Bewar, Mashan or Penda in Madhya Pradesh, and Poonam Krishi in Kerala. Jhum cultivation is largely practiced by tribal population dwelling in the forests, and that too predominantly in northeastern states of India. It is also prevalent in certain parts of Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and Kerala. As far as coverage and the number of families engaged in Jhum cultivation are concerned, there appears to be great amount of difficulties in knowing the exact estimates. This is due to a general lack of useful demographic data, ethnographic studies, and explicit knowledge about the location and intensity of these practices. For example, Government of India in 2000 claimed to have 23.58 lakh hectares of area under this cultivation. Strikingly, almost 83.7% of total Jhum cultivation is covered by the northeastern states, while some other studies, mainly study done by Methani and Tripathi, claim lower level of area coverage and dependence of families for their livelihood. In another study done by Raman in 2000, pegs these estimates slightly in a different way. According to his study, Jhum cultivation plays a crucial role in supporting livelihoods of almost 100 different indigenous tribes and over 6.2 lakh families in the 7 northeastern states. Now coming to the process of selection of plots and cultivation. Jhum cultivation begins with the selection of plot on or near the hillside or a jungle. It is usually done in the months of December or January with the ceremonial event done by the village elders or clan leaders. The fertility of the soil is judged by the color and the texture of the soil. In some tribes, community as a whole collectively clear selected piece of land, while in some others, the cutting of trees and shrubs is made by the respective family to whom the land has been allotted. At the time of allotment of land, size and workforce in the family are taken into consideration. Although the pattern and details of Jhum cultivation differ in different places and tribes, there are broad similarities. After the selection of the piece of land, the land is cleared by slashing unwanted trees and plants. After that, the slashed vegetation is allowed to dry on the hill slopes for a few months prior to burning in the month of March and April. The cultivators take extreme care that the fire should not spread into the forest by making fire breaks and pay special attention while burning the forest to avoid the chance of accidental fire spreading to the main forest and residential plots. Once the burning is complete, the unburned or partly burned rubbish are collected in one place for the complete burning. Then, later on, the plot is left with the burned ashes to be absorbed for a few months period. Then the ashes are scattered over the ground well before the advent of pre-monsoon rain. Crops are sown with the first rains in April, plots that ranges between 1 to 4 hectares in area. Jhum cultivators believe that such a process adds nutrient to the soil and thus any seed planted on such land would grow well and yield would be good. In the entire lifespan of the cultivator, he generally requires 4 to 5 plots of land to sustain his livelihood and meet the subsistence requirements. The cycle of cultivation, in which the land is left fallow and brought back again for cultivation, is called the June cycle. The period of consecutive cropping differs from region to region and from tribe to tribe. There is no given method to select a patch of land for June cultivation. Apart from these, other major features of June cultivation includes rotation of fields rather than rotation of crops and absence of drought animals and manure. The June cultivators largely rely on use of human labor and simple tools like axe, dibble stick or hoe, and short period of occupancy alternating with long fallow periods. It is usually done under rain-fed conditions. The cultivators do not use modern inputs such as chemical fertilizers, hybrid seeds, or modern machineries and tools. Thus, the soil is never plowed and no artificial irrigation is made. With the advent of rain, the seeds begins to sprout, which is followed by selective weeding done at regular intervals. The crops are also protected from stray cattle and wild animals by fencing the fields with bamboo. Many cultivators construct a hut in the field to look after the crops properly. After 1 or 2 years of cultivation, the June land loses its fertility. Then it is left to be reclaimed by natural vegetation once again. The same activity continues elsewhere. With this, the cycle continually repeats itself. Occasionally, some residual crops are also collected from the abundant fields. The area allotted per family varies between half hectare to 1 hectare among the different tribes, regions, and states. The land is cleared of all its undergrowth and the branches of trees are slashed off. The clear growth is allowed to dry on the field. This process of clearing, which takes over a month, is labor intensive, being undertaken with indigenous and primitive equipment. The old, widows, and children are also involved according to their physical and mental abilities. However, as far as decision making regarding what to grow, how to manage, and preserve traditional varieties of seed is concerned, it is either taken collectively at the household or community level. Quite often, it is done together in the community. In these societies, generally, the natural resource such as land, forest, and water belong to community and not to the individuals. Thus, the process of social organization of the people is built around the concepts of community ownership, community participation, and communal responsibility. The entire practice and the know-how related to June cultivation is passed from one generation to the other. The younger ones learn from the elder members about the knowledge of practicing the June cultivation through observation and doing trial and error method. Case studies in 7 Asian countries showed that indigenous women perform about 70% of the work in June cultivation. Generally, men do the hard physical work in land preparation. They prepare the plot for cultivation by slashing, burning, and clearing the patch of land. Women helps in cleaning the land, selecting seeds, and weeding. The day of sowing, which is a ceremonial day for the whole village, the male members of each family, on reaching the June field in the morning, engage themselves in preparing the digging sticks, either by broadcast method or dibbling. The male members broadcast seeds of crops like millets and small millets, whereas crops like maize, pulses, cotton, sesame, and vegetables are dibbled by the female members. While dibbling the seeds, the women walk over the field with a digging stick in their hand, make a hole in the ground, sow a few seeds and cover it over by the earth and press it down with your toe. Before sowing starts, evil spirits are worshipped and sacrifices are made for a good crop and prosperity to the family. Thus, one can say that the Jhum cultivation is very deeply rooted to the cultural beliefs and practices. Jhum cultivation, though a rudimentary technique of land and forest resource utilization, represents an intricate relationship between ecology, economy, and society of a region. The Jhum plots consist of mixed cropping. The mixture of crops varies from tribe to tribe within a region. Among the food grains, the coarse varieties of rice, followed by maize, millets, and small millets, are the principal crops grown. Cotton, ginger, linseed, rapeseed, sesame, pineapple, and jute are the important cash crops. Among the vegetables, soybean, potato, pumpkins, cucumber, yam, tapioca, etc. are cultivated. Thus, a single plot provides a different produce for the daily consumption. As different types of crops are grown in the field with different periods, upland rice and vegetables are harvested within a few months after sowing, whereas cotton, turmeric, and aram are harvested after 8 or 9 months, largely during December. This provides them varied food for next 6 to 9 months in a year. Unlike the commercial agriculture, wherein a given plot is used to cultivate single or a few crops, here a single plot is used to produce diverse set of crops ranges between 15 to 20. Thus are used to meet the food, fodder, medicine, firewood and other requirements of the tribal family. If there is any surplus left, then it is exchanged or bartered or sold for cash in the neighboring markets. Hence, this system is self-reliant with a high degree of economic interdependence. Cultivation of mixed cropping has also scientific basis in it as farmers grow soil exhausting crops, for example rice, maize, millets, cotton, etc., and soil enriching crops, for example legumes, together. It caters the subsistence needs of the community while maintaining the nutrient and fertility of the soil. In case the crop fails, the household use forest resources to meet their food requirements. The inferior grains and vegetable weeds are fed to pigs which are raised to meet their meat requirements. Jhum cultivation landscapes are often illegible to outsiders, are frequently devalued and labeled degraded. But those who are practicing the cultivation has a different story to tell. In recent years, when commercial agriculture has taken over subsistence agriculture, still the aboriginal people of Amazon forest continue with their traditional practice of Jhum cultivation. For many, slash and burn cultivation method is a way of living and from ages they are practicing this type of agriculture. A farmer say, I am doing this agriculture when I was young as 6 years old. That's the way I have done it, and they are also reluctant to do any other type of agriculture. According to them, they practice this cultivation because they have to plant and harvest to eat. When farmers were asked the reason to stick to Jhum cultivation practices when they can opt for commercial farming, which is more lucrative in nature, they stated the following reasons. A. According to them, they don't have tractor, modern machineries, and don't have access to bank facilities. B. There is no need to invest on purchased inputs and modern machineries as their own labor is sufficient to cultivate crops and meet the subsistence food requirement of the community. See, because there is no expenditure on this type of agriculture, whatever comes is the profit or surplus. Otherwise, the farmer says he will be left with little or no profit. Most of the farmers operate in small scales and they consider this cultivation practices more suitable for their small holding size as well as their subsistence needs. Now coming to the pros and cons of Jhum cultivation. There are divergence of opinion exists about the evil and adverse effects of Jhum cultivation on the ecology and environment of the region. During the earlier days, when there was abundance of land and sparse population spread, cultivators had more freedom to choose the plot, the time to cultivate, and also to leave the land fallow for longer duration. In the past, land was left fallow for 10 to 20 years. In places with sparse population, it was left even for 20 to 30 years, which allowed sufficient time to regenerate soil fertility and ensured forest regrowth. These days, due to population pressure with acute land scarcity, has forced the farmers to reduce the fallow cycle between 3 to 5 years. In a study done in Rangamati district of Bangladesh, the researcher found that around 80% of the cultivator practiced fallow period less than 3 years. The study also found that the region is facing severe population pressure due to migration, lack of awareness about family planning, low education, etc. Thus, such a situation has made the Jhum cultivation unsustainable and pushed the people to vicious cycle of poverty in the region. A study which examines the Jhum cycle, the period of occupancy, and duration of fallowing of some of the tribes in the hilly tract of northeast India found that except Idu Mismi, which comes under the Lohit district, in all the other 5 regions, the tribes occupy Jhum land for sowing only for 1 year. Such short period fallow is widely understood as not being sufficient for the soil to regain its productivity. The duration of Jhum cycle is decisive on various counts, particularly in maintaining the fertility of the soil, flora and fauna of the forest. Frequent shifting from one plot to the other has adverse effect on the ecology of these regions. The area under natural forests has declined. Disappearance of native species and invasion by exotic weeds and other plants are some of the other ecological consequences of shifting agriculture. It has also resulted in the deterioration of fauna and microbial organisms, topsoil loss and erosion during period of heavy rainfall. Rajiv et al. In his 2014 study, found that the tribes in which the Jhum cycle is around 5 years are facing serious problems of undernourishment and the ecosystem are fast losing their resilience characteristics. The area having Jhum cycle of 2 and 7 years is more vulnerable to weed invasion compared to Jhum cycle of 20 years. The area with 15 years Jhum cycle has more nutrients, large number of species and higher agronomic yield with ratio of energy output to input which is 25:6 productions compared to Jhum cycle of 10 and 5 years. In these areas, the cultivators are abandoning the field due to rapid depletion of soil. Repeated short cycle Jhuming has created forest canopy gaps which are evident from the barren hills. But there is another set of studies which indicate that if Jhum cultivation is practiced well, incorporating the traditional knowledge of fallow management, this system is sustainable without undermining the soil fertility and productivity. At the same time, it will also conserve biodiversity. According to Raman, in his 2000 study, reduction in the Jhum cycle is serious, but linking it to population pressure is scarce. In reality, Jhum cycle often declines because of external pressure, relocation and grouping of villages or reduced land availability. Whereas the study done by Singh in 1996 has pointed out that there is often no strong relationship between population pressure and Jhum cycle because villagers choose to cultivate at cycles of 5 to 10 years even when longer fallow periods are possible. and the population density would impinge on Jhum cultivation only after some critical threshold of high population pressure is crossed. The duration of the fallow period is influenced by the ease of clearing the vegetation and soil fertility levels following the slash and burn operations. The burning of slash returns nutrients to the soil through ash and kill microbes, allowing relatively high yields. After 10 years, the vegetation and soil properties recover to levels that can support another round of Jhum cultivation. While in another study done in the Tat hamlet of Vietnam found that the land cover in secondary vegetation may be degraded in terms of merchantable timber species. However, the secondary degraded vegetation, a product of Sweden land use system, might well be the most species rich and water and soil holding land cover available. Some studies opine that encouragement of cultivation of rubber and palm oil trees by the government in the forest of northeastern region has encouraged monocropping and also deforestation. Such examples are found in many parts of the world where Jhum cultivation has been gradually replaced by more intensive form of land use. For instance, in the mountain of Nepal, Jhum cultivation had been completely replaced by intensive sedentary agriculture by the end of the 19th century. Such process also has happened in the northern Thailand and peninsular Malaysia, Indonesia. Singh 1996 has reviewed studies carried out by the Indian Council of Agricultural Research that compared soil erosion from Jhum fields with other form of cultivation on terrace and counter births. The study found that Jhum fields cultivated for single year and abundant have less erosive loss of soil than the other forms of settled cultivation. Studies have found that cutting of trees, collection of soil, extraction of stone, river erosion, and landslide are responsible for degradation of environment. Often, these are the factors which are usually overlooked. Therefore, it is difficult to establish one-to-one relationship between Jhum cultivation and environment degradation. But studies have supported the belief that Jhum has a detrimental impact on wildlife. Studies in Mizoram on rainforest birds, arboreal mammals, and plants have shown that second growth habitats created by Jhum, especially young fallows and dense monotypic bamboo forests, support only a fraction of the hoary bellied squirrels, which are of little conservation importance. A large number of specialized and endangered flora and fauna, such as hillock gibbons, langurs, hornbills, and woodpeckers, occurs only in undisturbed primary forests. Now, coming to the emerging challenges as an outcome of Jhum cultivation. Jhum cultivation requires access to different plots of land in a given time span. Land right and access to it are the two major problems faced by the tribals living in the forest. Right through the British period, virtually no right to the land has been recorded. The insignificant Nistar right, which was subsequently made as concession to collect some firewoods, leaves, food items, fruits, etc., has been recorded. Faulty interpretation of the Forest Right Act, stipulating that it only recognizes rights over forest land under continuous occupation, not under seasonal occupation, which is the practice in Jhum cultivation, as well as the general prejudice within the government conservation agencies against the practice of Jhum cultivation as being detrimental to forest. For instance, in Koraput district of Odisha, the forest department has taken up an incredible 52,800 hectare of plantations due to the absence of forest right to the dwellers. Much of this plantation is taken up on land already being cultivated or under Jhum cultivation by tribals. The Sweden per Jhum cultivation was never settled with respective tribal communities. These lands were settled either as forest land or as government revenue land. Thus, paradoxically, even though three-fourths of the land in tribal districts belong to government, most tribals remain landless or marginal landowners. The recent India's Forest Right Act 2006 is undoubtedly a landmark shift towards pro-poor institutional reform in the governance of the country's forest. The Act has the potential of restoring the enclosed commons to communities and private land to the individual cultivators. But given the rules for implementation and the agencies involved in implementing will minimize its impact. It undermines the foundational position of the forest, prepares the ground for profits, and minimally serves the interests of the marginalized tribal and forest dwellers. The dynamics of Jhum cultivation has changed over time, and in some regions, such changes have been rapid. In the northeastern states, also, there is a decline evident in the net area cultivated under Jhum cultivation. Similarly, the number of persons dependent on Jhum cultivation has also undergone decline from 1.1% in 1970 to 71 to 0.7% in 1995 to 96. Many Jhum cultivators have switched to commercial agriculture, consists of the use of hybrid seeds, fertilizers, pesticides that may not necessarily suit the local agroecological conditions. While such change can sometimes increase the cultivator's immediate income, but its results have often been adverse or unsustainable. These changes have often resulted in instabilities in previously well adopted Jhum cultivation and resource use, jeopardizing their ecological and in some cases economic sustainability. The major challenges associated with the Jhum cultivation are: number one, the youth are no more interested to work in the traditional way of cultivation. The younger generation who are gaining education are no longer interested to cultivation and are searching other occupation. Even in some villages which were earlier predominated by this cultivation practices are now losing its ground. 2. Many of the Jhum cultivators are unable to maintain food security by solely relying on Jhum cultivation. In period of drought and flood, the situation gets grim and poses threat to meet the food and other needs of the community. Third, the market is the major problem faced by the Jhumias, as their produce is small and most of them are illiterate. Therefore, they are often exploited in the hands of middlemen and traders. Hence, to overcome these problems, many farmers are leaving the traditional way of cultivation and are shifting to the settled agriculture. The major concern here is that such a shift also leads to redundancy of traditional knowledge, community system of cultivation, because for the Jhum farmer, it is a way of living and not merely a way of earning a living. Now, at last, we come to the conclusion. Jhum is a traditional way of cultivation which is an integral part of Jhumias and their livelihoods. From clearing a patch of land till harvest of final produce, utilizing the fallow lands for various purposes, all these processes are complicated, yet with scientific basis, which not only meets the subsistence needs but also takes care of the fertility of soil. Such a cultural and traditional practice need to be encouraged in a sustainable way. For instance, crops which are grown under Jhum is organic and need to be marketed. Farmers need to be provide market linkage with good price support. Moreover, there are other techniques like Ingar, wherein the trees in the plot are cut till chest height and which not only provides continuous supply of green manure to the soil but also acts as mulching and prevents weed growth and nourishing to the seedlings and new crops vegetation. So these kind of new techniques and methods could be adopted to enhance Jhum cultivation.